This guy is the most annoying main character who bullies everyone in the academy because he's a powerful noble. One word from his father, and they could vanish from the face of the earth. However, his life started to change when a blacksmith defeated him. But before I spoil the fun, let's start the story. If that world was something created by God, and if it had the protagonist, then surely it was definitely him. A man named Tartun was rejoicing after defeating a man who can't properly use a sword or magic. He dares to challenge him. People were screaming not to treat their classmates like that, but he didn't listen. He even calls them peasants. He told everyone whoever dares to give order to him, he will tell his grandma. He calls for his servants and asks for a towel. So those servants rushed towards him since it was already prepared. On his back, some students were gossiping about how he treats other students like a servant, where the one who's important is his lord father and not him. Tartun has wealth, power, and talent. He was born with everything that the world has to offer except for one thing. Inside of the classroom, their teacher asked them to open their book on page 120 of modern history. The teacher started to teach them about 100 years ago. The human wars fought with sword and magic were ended by a single king. The world's first ever unified nation. That's the Astoria kingdom they live in today. For the past century, the throne has passed down to the fifth king. But ruling the world is not easy. Only the most exceptional human alive could pull that off. And to decide who that is, in 8 months, they will hold the Royal Selection Exam, or the King's Trial. It was held once every 20 years. Every citizen of Astoria can take it, but only one person can get the crown. One person out of the entire population, the most brutal exam in the world. In Tartkun's mind, the trial was made for him. After the class, students went to the cafeteria for a break. The two servants earlier were holding their snacks ready to share with Tart. But the man had already had a table full with delicious food and servants. He had his private chef rent out part of the kitchen because he needed the best meals to get in top shape for the king's trial. He even bluntly told them that he can't let peasants slop dull his body. Upon hearing it, students from the other table were irritated for calling their food trash. His companion stopped him because he already knew who his dad was, the overprotective lord. Last year, someone hit him and injured him. So the whole family got their assets seized. They basically had to flee town overnight. Another student told him not to stress himself out because guys like that always get what's coming to them eventually. Then another student who was holding his tray of food suddenly tripped and his food landed on the fat servant. People widened their eyes because that was too close to Tarta. The fat servant was furious at Figo because his food was all over his body. He immediately stood up, yelling at him, so he quickly apologized. He shockingly reasoned that he was up late helping out at home and didn't sleep properly. The two were changing words that made Tart irritated. He stood up and asked his old servant to go home because he had no time to waste on peasants. The class ended. Riding a carriage, a servant was elaborating about his schedule regarding the magic advanced theory, political science, strength and combat training, as well as dinner with his father. He asks the servant if the schedule is the optimal path for passing the king's trial. When the servant agreed, he didn't object. He reached their house and was greeted by his father. The father asks about the special lunch from his private chef. He was delighted when Tart said that it was perfect. Then his father asks again if there's anything he needs. All he needed was just a word, and his father was willing to eliminate anything for his sake. He couldn't say a word for how amazing his father was. Flawless, he has it all. Everything he needs to be a king. He thought he was loved by the god, and the world itself celebrated with him. At that point, he might already be king. When morning came, he went to his school. He was blushing when he found a letter on his locker, calling him Tartartois croque monsieur. The sender was waiting for him under the harla tree behind the school on their graduation day. He assumed that it was a love letter. Other students who passed by were wondering about his reaction. On their graduation day, everyone was wearing their robes while Tart arrived, wearing a Tartatou's croque monsieur and a crown. Other students commented that he was a whole buffet of bad taste for wearing a peacock around his neck. Then he waited patiently on the harla tree to see who the letter sender was. The ugly moron was shocked to see that it was just Figo, who apologized for making him wait. Tart didn't know that he was the letter sender. Figo explained that he was the one who put the letter on his locker. Tart thought it was a girl, but he was wrong. He was freaking out because he made an outfit just for that day, but found out that it was not a girl. Figo apologized. He didn't know how to say his request, but he gathered his courage and asked for a duel. He also added that he's been mocked his whole life for being the blacksmith's kid who can't swing a sword and has no magic either. But he wants to prove that even someone like him can become a king. He wants to surpass Tart, who has everything that he doesn't. In response, Tart asks him what exactly he can gain from accepting the duel. Figo didn't know what he could offer in return. Tart was irritated because normally he would slide it, but today's special. So he ordered Figo to go in the courtyard because he planned to pay him full for stepping on his moment. Students gather in the courtyard when they hear that Tart and Figo will have a duel. Tart's servant brought fake swords and a staff. Other students decided to leave and refused to watch because they already knew who would win. Figo shows his Cyclops, a massive hammer where he poured everything he had on it. set, his masterpiece. He was going all out, so he begged Tart to face him, but Tart was not scared of his Cyclop. He turns to a teacher and orders him to be the judge. Then the teacher announced the duel between Tart and Figo. The match ends when one is incapacitated or yields. Then the duel began. Figo rushed towards Tart to attack, but the latter immediately forms a counterattack, fires his fire magic ball, and throws it at Figo. Other students along with Figo can't help but be amazed at how huge the fireball is. But Figo was not scared, and used his Cyclop mech-powered punch to counterattack it. The impact created a massive gust of wind, and when it disappeared, the student was amazed at how Figo punched Tart's attack. Tart couldn't believe it while the teacher learned about Figo's power. An alloy fused with magic reflecting materials. Boosters activate by trigger. A creation by someone with neither sword or magic. A king forged by machines. Figo was determined to win the duel and become a king with his technology. Students were amazed at Figo. Others find him awesome and take back what they said towards him. They were all cheering for him. That's why Tart was irritated, because that makes him look like he was the underdog instead. He gritted his teeth because machines are just assistive tools for the socially weak who can't use magic. He won't let some scrap metal beat his magic. He used his lightning magic, the lightning spear, and struck it towards Figo. The teacher saw it and thought that Tart realized his firepower was outmatched, so he's going for speed with lightning-type magic. Then, the next move was to close the gap while the opponent was stunned and slashed. Figo, a blacksmith's son who can't even wield a sword, that's the way they used to mock him. Tart knew about that weakness of Figo, so he was certain that this blacksmith wouldn't be able to handle such a huge weapon. To his and the others' shock, Figo hit him in his guts and slid to the ground. According to Figo, a wooden sword for class is too light. His body ends up swinging it instead, but he's a blacksmith. When it comes to handling hammers, he won't lose to anyone. Students start to cheer for him again. Tart was frustrated. He thought he was born with wealth, power, and talent. He was born to become a king. He worked so hard for it. He trained under the top instructors his father picked for him. There's no way he could lose to a commoner like Figo. He decided to use his lightning spear again. The teacher noticed that he was panicking because he used the move he worked on earlier. Figo seems ready. His output is 50%. Students were stunned when Figo flew heading towards Tarte. The latter looked scared. His thoughts were still filled with every material he had. He thought he was the main character of this world, but he began to doubt it as he cried, looking at Figo, who now had his weapon at 100% output, and struck it toward him. He took that mechanical meteor head-on and was thrown away. The impact was so huge that the students grew worried, thinking Figo had gone too far. Pieces of stone were scattered and smoke filled the area. Then the teacher looked for Tarte. He, along with the other students, was astounded when the smoke faded and revealed Tart lying on the ground. He had peed his pants and seemed unconscious. The teacher announced that the winner was Figo. The students were all happy with the result. One student commented, "I told you, a guy like Tart would eat dirt eventually." After that, Figo, who seemed worried about Tart, was trying to wake him up. He was relieved when Tart opened his eyes. He was thankful that Tart gave all he got and gave his hand to help him. Tart looks at him momentarily before slapping Figo's hand. He told everyone that he didn't lose. The machine that Figo uses is cheating, invalid, because it doesn't count if it's not a fair sword fight. Tears ran down his eyes when the teacher told him that he lost the duel. He clenched his fist and yelled to the students, calling them a filthy commoner. He ordered them not to look at him. He also threatened that he would tell his father for their execution. Students couldn't handle his arrogance anymore and started to leave. Figo noticed them, so the teacher also told him that he should head home. Later on, the courtyard was cleared, but Tart was still there until the rain started to pour. The teacher stood by his side with an umbrella. He told Tart that Figo was so strong. He was sure that he spent a lot of time thinking and working hard to get there. Tart gritted his teeth and yelled at the teacher, claiming that he had worked harder than he had. He was confused when the teacher asked if he really worked hard. Of course he has. Under the best instructors, his father handpicks for him. But it was not his effort, but the effort of the adults who wanted to make him king. The teacher explains that he's been writing their efforts without thinking about himself. The teacher also added that he sees him as a regular guy with rich parents. At his rate, he's not going to become the king, because the wealth and power he thinks of as his isn't actually his. Even the effort he thinks he made doesn't belong to him. So he asked Tart what he truly has. The teacher seemed relieved after telling him what he needed to say. He reminds Tart not to catch a cold from cooling his head too much. Then the teacher went home. It was already late when Tart arrived at their home. His father was relieved when he saw him and told him that he went ahead on his graduation and started preparing his journey to the capital. He also boasts that he made an arrangement so he can train even better while traveling, gather the best support team for him and introduce by the next day. But none of it catches Tart's interest and just simply thank his father. He waves goodbye and goes to his room to sleep early. When he was alone, he felt that his shoulder was a little off. He convinced himself that it was because the graduation outfit was too heavy. He even blamed the costume team for not noticing the details. He tries to convince himself that if it weren't for that outfit, he would have won. But his teacher's voice still echoes in his mind. About all the effort was from the adults for trying to make him a king, that he was a rich guy's average son. He burst into tears because reality hit him. He was being defeated by a filthy commoner. After taking a bath, he asks himself what he truly has. He looks for a backpack in the cabinet and starts to pack his things. He felt sorry for his father, but he didn't need his support. Even without his help, he was determined to become a king. He was born with everything and was the protagonist of the world. He leaves the mansion and walks away. After hours of walking, he is still thinking of the thing at the beginning of the first chapter, which he is the protagonist of this world. But look at his face now. He looks like a man who entered a tavern and got out after succubus had drained his milk. He extended his trembling hand, asking someone to give him some luxurious food before kissing the floor. When he opened his eyes, he was in an unfamiliar room with a maid standing on the side. He was clueless, so the maid explained that she received an order from her master to search for Tart and accompany him to the royal capital. She also added that he was found collapsed, so she took him to that inn for protection. Considering his ability, the maid already figured out that there's a high chance he'd collapse in the next town over. Tart praises the maid for saving him, but he insists not to rely on his father's help. He told the maid that he will go to the royal capital alone and don't need her help. The maid understood, but she remained standing in front of him. Tart orders him to go home, but the maid declines it since her employer is his father and not him. Tart was having a second thought when he remembered what the teacher said. He was dumbfounded when the teacher suddenly arrived. He assumed that he was a ghost, because his father won't let it slide all the insults that the teacher throws at him. The teacher smiled because he almost got killed for telling things like Tart's parents are just rich and he'll never be a king. He was tied up when he dragged there to meet him. When his father asked him where he wanted to go on a vacation, the teacher found it sounded like, "Where do you want to be buried?" He burst into tears when he realized all the things he told Tart. But before anything worse could happen, a butler came and told the father about his background. Then an idea came to their mind. The maid introduced the teacher as Romeo Wingate. He was a finalist in the last royal exam selection. Tart was confused because there should only be 10 in the world, but then he remembered that the teacher was the one called Loser Romeo. He made it to the final round of the last royal exam called the most rigorous in history, but was utterly overwhelmed by the other candidates and failed. He gained that nickname, Loser Romeo. The maid still insists that Romeo is still one of the only 10 in the world who reached the final exam. Tart couldn't believe it when Romeo told him that he's going to be his overall mentor. It's the deal he made with his father. When Tart remembers Romeo asked him what he truly possessed, he refused him. He doesn't care who he is and won't rely on his father's help. He was determined to become a king on his own. Tart was startled when Romeo also refused because he can't just back down because who knows what his father would be capable of. Besides, the salary is amazing. Then the two started to argue about what happened in the courtyard. So Tart decided to take it outside. Romeo agrees, but before that, he offers a sandwich to Tart because he needs to eat. Later on, the two stood face to face. Romeo asks Tart if he plans a duel again, but he does not, because Tart was going to test him. He needs to confirm if he's actually strong. The test is simple. For the next 3 minutes, he will attack Romeo non-stop. If he remains standing without kneeling even once, he will let him train without complaining. However, if Romeo kneels even once, he won't be his father's hired tutor. He will be his direct underling on his journey. Romeo realizes that instead of supporting the father, he'll become Tart's tool. So he asks if dodging and blocking is allowed. When Tart agreed, Romeo had no reason to accept, so if that's all it takes, it is fine. Upon hearing his words, Tart burst into anger and planned to make him regret it. He ordered the maid to start the timer, but Romeo refused because it didn't matter. Those words made him even furious. He rapidly uses his lightning magic, the lightning shower, and strikes it towards Romeo. He smiled and assumed that he won. He was once told that the key to battle is a preemptive strike. He needs to be taken before he's taken from. Tart assumed that Romeo let his guard down, but he was wrong. Romeo uses his shield magic umbrella to dodge his strike. He teases Tart that he will handle the timing while holding a pocket watch. That made Tart more furious and strike him again, using his earth magic hammer. But he was not done yet. He followed his whirlwind magic. He planned to break Romeo's stance and lift his body, confuse his sense of direction with the wind magic. Then his final blow, the lightning shower. But all of it was calmly avoided by Romeo using just his umbrella. He remembers that there are 4 primary ways to land an attack on his opponent. First, to catch them off guard by a surprise attack. Second is to break their stance. Third is to overwhelm them with speed. And last, penetrate their defense. By mixing these 4 according to the situation, he will maintain control of the fight. The larger the shield's area, the harder it is to maintain its thickness. He will smash through that shield and use his flame armament magic, the flame charge lance. Romeo noticed that his shield had a crack due to Tart's attack, so he uses his crushing heaven disc to avoid his strike. As a result, Tart landed hard on the ground. He immediately stood up and accused Romeo of cheating. The latter was dismayed for calling his move cheating, just because things didn't go his way. So he told him that during his exam, he read books from all over the world. He learned techniques from every master he could find. He believes he worked harder than any other examinee, yet he still couldn't become a king who is the pinnacle of all people. The weak cannot become a king. He still remembered how others mock and insult him for being weak, underdog, a nobody, and a talentedless. He asked the kid how he dares to dream of becoming a king when he can't even land a hit on a loser like him. He looks at the clock and finds that there's 2 minutes left. He encouraged Tart to come at him like he meant to kill him. Tart charged in, recalling that to become a king, he studied hard and never skipped training. Everyone told him that if he did exactly as they said, he would become a king. But what was he supposed to do in this situation? Romeo dodged his attack, making him kiss the floor. Romeo believed that the lessons from teachers and books were like food given to raise a child. It wouldn't make someone a king just by being fed. That's why he asked the kid what he truly possessed. A person's true strength is revealed only when they're cornered. With 30 seconds left on the clock, he shouted at the kid to give it everything he had. Crying and kneeling wouldn't make him a king. If nothing came out of him now, then he was just like Romeo, a loser. If he hated that, then he had to stand up. Tart gritted his teeth as he was trying to stand up. Everything he learned isn't working. The word he will never be a king keeps popping on his mind. He didn't know what to do, but he knew there had to be something. He burst into tears, but he wanted to prove himself. He remembers what Figo said, that even someone with nothing like him can become a king. Those words hit him, and he thought of a way. He hates the idea of being a loser. No matter what tricks he has to use, he was determined to become the protagonist. He rapidly rushed towards the teacher. Romeo assumed that he was blindly charging in, but he never expected that Tart would use fire magic and launch it towards him. He used the fireball to boost his sword speed and power. That technique is the same as Figo's. He lost his balance, but luckily, he didn't fall on the ground. He was impressed, but the 3 minutes ended. Romeo admits that his last strike caught him a bit off guard, but it wasn't enough to bring him down. He had far worse hits than that. He didn't know what to say when he saw how furious Tart was, because he had been defeated once again. He knew that in the end, he alone had nothing. That's true back then. But that defeat gave something. Not something given, but something stolen. If Tart had nothing, then he must obtain it even if that power comes from someone who once humiliated him. Even if it's shameful, if he has the guts to cling to his dream, then he really is an underdog. He needs to keep acting cool and stay a loser. He took Tart's sword and asked if he would hire him, not as a servant, but as a mentor. In that way, he'll be neither his father's support nor his tool, but the power he obtained for himself. Tart couldn't believe it, but since Romeo passed the test, he won't complain. He took his sword and asked him to make him a king. Romeo was happy, but Tart just smirked at him. When Romeo asks about the salary, Tart bursts into anger because that comes after the result. Because he left his home broke and collapsed on the street. Romeo drops his jaw when the maid suddenly interrupts and tells them that she has already sent a letter notifying his father of the contract cancellation. In that case, even if they continue their journey, they need funds first. He asked Tart to take on a subquest, a traveling request. Tart was clueless, so he explained that it's a system where travelers earn expenses along the way, things like gathering herbs or hunting monsters. It is essentially helping people in need and being rewarded, but first, they need to check if there are any requests in town. Although confused, Tart follows him. On their way, Tart noticed some smoke nearby. Romeo smiles because someone looks like they're in trouble, and that smoke smells like money. So he orders Tart to hurry up before someone else solves it first. Tart follows, but in his mind, if he could find another mentor, he would fire Romeo on the spot. Furthermore, the smoke came from a huge monster. People couldn't believe it, but they had to run to escape. The owner of the monster wanted their slime. They need to hand it over quietly, and will let them off easily. The travelers refuse and angrily ask who he was. So a man named Kajira introduced himself. He claimed that in the next royal exam, he'll be the man who becomes the Demon King. A king who brings peace between monsters and humans. In short, the Demon King. Travelers didn't buy his mumbling, believing that monsters and humans getting along is just too impossible. So one of them charges in and runs towards them. He struck his sword against the monster, but his sword was cut in half. The travelers were frozen and realized that Kajira seriously got the monster to obey him. Kajira demanded his slime, though it was not his. The boss of the travelers refused. They will never hand the slime to him. Kajira had no other choice. The monster created a massive power and threw it at them. Fortunately, Romeo arrives in time and uses his magic umbrella to cover them. Romeo knew that they were confused for who he was, so he told them not to worry because he meant no harm. Then he asks them if the event is a kind of problem where he got paid off. Then Tart, along with the maid, arrive. Kajira saw them, but it doesn't matter if they are many. He orders the monster to create another attack. Luckily, Tart quickly jumped to avoid it. Romeo turned to Tart and gave orders to negotiate with the travelers about the money, and he will handle Kajira. Then he sensed something was coming, so he used his umbrella to block Kajira's attack. But to his surprise, he smashed his umbrella with his bare hands. He knew Kajira was not ordinary. Tart suddenly cursed because he was clueless of the event. He ordered the travelers to just hand over the money. The travelers ask him if he was willing to help them. They are willing to pay. The slime that they got is rare, called an egg slime. If they sell it, it'll go for more than 1 million. If they escort them to the next village, they will pay them 100,000. Romeo was dumbfounded when he heard the amount because it was a ton of money. But Tart seems not satisfied because it's just pocket change. The man explained that his daughter is sick and needed to buy some insanely expensive herbs to cure her. Tarte was sure that it was a lie. But since the pocket change matters right now, he wondered whether he should take the deal or not. Hearing the words deal made the travelers assume it was set, so they ran, counting on them to deal with the matters. Kajira was furious, but Romeo calmly threatened him that he would knock him out if he got in his way. He then inquired if Kajira would give them the money if they didn't get in his way, because honestly, he hates to lose the money, but this time, he needs to prioritize Tart's growth. He turns around and orders Tart that it's his turn to have a little fight with Kajira. But the latter found it an opportunity as soon as Romeo turned around. The three were surprised when Kajira suddenly jumped to avoid them and followed the travelers. He ordered his monster named Kinta to hold them for him. Romeo commands Tart to follow Kajira, and he'll handle the monster alone. The maid was about to accompany Tart, but Romeo stopped her because he was going to fight alone. The maid told Romeo that his father ordered her to protect Tarta, so if he interferes, she'll consider him as an enemy. She unsheathed her sword and reminded Romeo of how she utterly defeated him. The two become serious and seem ready to fight each other. That's why the monster was confused on who he will be dealing with. Meanwhile, the travelers run fast, but no matter how fast they are, Kajira still manages to overtake them. He demanded the travelers to give up the slime. Unfortunately, stone bullets were rushing towards him. He was enraged when he turned around and saw that it was still Tart who persisted in following him. The leader of the travelers told his companion to go ahead and hide in a huge rock. It seems he didn't trust Tart, so he was waiting for the right timing to strike. Tarte told Kajira to give up if he didn't want to get hurt, but Kajira could say Tarte was weaker than him. Frustrated, Tarte used earth magic and launched a rock cannon towards his opponent, but the latter simply smashed it to pieces with his bare hands. Kajira wondered if he was scared now, but Tart was not. In the past few days, many of his attacks have been crushed, so he was used to it. Kajira assumed that he fought some pretty tough guys, so he started to make his move. Tart seems to be having a hard time since Kajira was way too fast. In a second, Kajira jumps high and uses his tail to strike Tart. As a result, Tart was slammed on the ground. He gets up and asks how his tail works. In response, Kajira told him that it doesn't work because the tail is real. He also added that he's half monster and half human. Tart yells at him because no such thing exists. Kajiro insists that it's true since he exists, but Tart also insists that it's impossible because humans and monsters have been at war for 100 years. They're natural enemies. Even forming a peaceful relationship is hard enough. Kajiro seemed pissed off, so he decided to show him a proof. He orders Tart to hit him with his strongest magic, but he will not dodge or block it. Tart was bewildered on how that is supposed to prove anything. Kajiro didn't listen. Instead, he urged him to do it. He even teased Tart if he was scared that he'll crush his attack again. So Tart created a massive fireball, but he was amazed when Kajira just simply swallowed it. Now Tart seems to be shaking as Kajira told him it was too soon to be scared. Meanwhile, the maid and Romeo were still arguing because the maid knew Kajira's physical ability and fighting spirit is not ordinary. Romeo agrees because in terms of combat ability alone, he's no doubt a true king's vessel, and that's exactly why he wants him to lose. He knew what Tart needs right now is defeat. The maid was confused because Romeo was being a bit too optimistic. If things go wrong, it might not end so simply. It's not just an ordinary defeat. The maid and Romeo started to fight. He knew that Kajira is undoubtedly the vessel of the next king. That's why he wanted to beat him. Because right now, what Tart needs is a defeat. The maid told him that if it's just a simple defeat, there's no problem. However, it wouldn't just end in a simple defeat. Romeo insults her for being an overprotective to Tart. He also added that before they met Kajira, he already heard them calling him the next king's vessel. He's a murderer, not a student, but an assassin. Defeat can be a seed for growth, although it's precious. On the other hand, Kajira admits that he doesn't know how to use magic that he had, but he can eat and digest his magic and shoot it out from his body. His body is the body of a monster. Tart was shaking in fear when he realized that he was a monster. However, when the leader heard it, he couldn't believe that Kajira was a monster that no one can beat. In the royal selection test, even Kajira can take the exam. Kajira agrees with Tart that he is a monster, neither human nor a demon. That's why he will become a king that connects monsters and humans. Romeo and the maid were not yet finished. The maid said that she was not worried about his death or life. Instead, she was concerned that his heart would break. Romeo was not bothered and told that it's fine. For him, a mere defeat won't be enough. So he urged her to just bring it on. Because a defeat without pain is meaningless. Just like Tart, who seems to want to give up when he finds out that Kajira was a monster. He had teary eyes when Kajira asked him not to hurt them. He was there because he just wanted to help his friend, so he begged him to let him go. Then he walked away. Tart's tears kept flowing. He tightly grips his sword. The sun was about to rise, yet still confused if he was going to lose again. Because against a monster like Kajira, there's no way he could win. But he realized the king of the royal capital is a test to decide the king of humanity, so it doesn't matter if he loses. Without the qualification to take the exam, a monster like that is just a waste of time to face. It's pointless. He calls himself an idiot. The sun is about to rise, so if he runs like a coward, he cannot be a king. But he decided to become one, so he immediately charged and threw Kajira a massive stone. The latter angrily turned and punched it into pieces with his bare hand. He told Kajira that the one who will become the king is him. Kajira formed an evil smile when he learned that Tart was an examinee too. Hoping Tart will not regret his action, so he bolted towards him to attack. Tart was determined at least until the sun sets. He swung his sword, but Kajira jumped to avoid. Tart launches multiple lightning bolts, but the half-human just eats them and launches the same spell, electrocuting Tart. Tart showered him with rocks, but Kajira skillfully dodged all of them and then fired a huge fireball. As the sun was about to set, Tarty could be seen standing, still smoking, from the last hit he received. Knowing it was a one-sided battle, the half-human told him to stop it already. Even the leader who's watching behind agree with Kajira because there's no way he can win against the monster. Kajira was surprised because Tarte didn't give up. The sun has set, so he lifts his staff and uses the light magic. Then he created a massive dazzling light that made Kajira and the leader cover their eyes. Tart understands from his attack so far that Kajira can only absorb formless magic. But a simple physical magic won't work. Then what should be done is the fastest, most powerful physical attack. He charges firepower to the maximum, the fireball. As he jumps, Tart can feel the pain, but the power from back then won't be enough. He lifted his sword, aiming to a point where he couldn't be dodged, but his sword hit Kajira's mouth, so the latter tightly bit it, which made it stop. He didn't care if he was being stopped because he'd swing right through, because he was determined to become the protagonist, the main character. As a result of his powerful attack, Kajira was being thrown to the ground. Tart's sword was being cut into half while Kajira's mouth was bleeding. The leader dropped his jaw in amazement because he did it. Tart was happy, although shaking in exhaustion, but they were shocked when Kajira still could stand, since it was just a single shot for him. Smoke was coming out from Tart's body and standing was already his limit. Kajira finds it hard to believe that he did that massive attack just to go that far. He assumed Tart really wanted to become a king, so he asked his reason for wanting to become one. Although shaking in exhaustion, Tart told him that he didn't have some grand theory unlike him. He was just someone who had everything and is loved by the gods. He was their world's main character and was born to become king. Tart always believed that and never doubted even once. He never knew that giving up on his dream was that scary. The leader was speechless while Kajira understood. He found Tart a worthy rival who chases the same dream as his. He asks Tart to settle it properly, but before they could start to strike each other again, the leader stopped them. He was begging to stop and was ready to give up the slime. Before anyone could react, it looks like Tart couldn't take the smoke coming out of his body. He lost consciousness and fell on the ground. When he woke up, he was in an unfamiliar room. The leader suddenly came with a tray in his hand. It's the leader's house. So he put on his clothes and went outside. He was speechless because outside there was a kid who's playing on the tummy of the monster. Kajira, Romeo, and the maid were there too. A woman was surprised to see him as they passed by because he seemed to be getting better. The leader's two companions were happy to see him. As expected of the medicinal herbs they gave Tart, it's amazing. The leader finds it perfect timing, so he asks his companion, even the lady and the kid, to gather. Then they simultaneously apologize. It's true that the man's daughter really has a mysterious sickness. To cure her, a medicinal herb called thousand poison grass was necessary. That herb only grows on a monster-filled island in the demon world. To get it, it would have taken a huge amount of money. Tart was confused because Kajira boasted that he was the one who had the medicinal herb and didn't have to fight with him. But then, Tart realized what happened earlier, but they both suddenly stopped when the leader interrupted and thanked them both. Kajira, who has the medicinal herb, and Tart, who fought for them. Even so, they saved his daughter's life, so thanking them will never be enough. He gave them a bag of money as a token of gratitude and an apology for the trouble. Tart drops his jaw when Romeo suddenly appears and chooses which bag is for him. Later on, the boss told them to go to the port town ahead where a ship goes to the royal capital. He also added that he used to be an adventurer back then, though he failed the first test. That's why he knows the fear of giving up on a dream. He faced Tart and Kajira and gave advice, although a bit cliché, to do their best because one of them will definitely become a king. They are rooting for both of them. Then, Tart remembers again how Romeo prankly told him that he can't become a king. It's the first time he heard those words, that someone was rooting for him. His eyes start to water, that's why Kajira starts to tease him. They start to walk away, yet they are still having an argument. The maid realized that the two somehow found a compromise. Meanwhile, a ship was being attacked by a monster. The old man calls for a lady to help. The lady told the old man to leave the monster to her, the future king. A fairy on her side advises Sherry not to fall into the sea. They need to hurry and finish it. So the lady quickly transforms into her magical girl dress-up. In the bar, Sherry told her mother that she had already finished washing the dishes. Her mother thought it helps a lot, but she must be tired after fighting the boss. Sherry refused because she was totally fine. Her family runs a tavern, so working actually relaxes her. Then a customer called for her to place an order. Sherry delightedly walks towards him. The mother appreciated it, but it looked like Sherry was having a hard time listening to the orders. He mistakenly heard the beer for bar, fish and chips for tissue and compress. So the customer decided to write his order on his own. Since Sherry was cute, he will let it slide. Her mother knew that she was kinda clumsy when it came to work. Meanwhile, Tart, along with the others, arrive at the tavern. Sherry greeted them but realized that they were there for the exam too. She told them that she was there too for the same reason, so she encouraged them to do their best. She gives them her sweetest smile, that's why Tart drops his jaw. Seems like he couldn't handle her cuteness. An old man suddenly bumps into him and advises not to let her cuteness fool him. He also added that Sherry is pretty amazing. The old man, who looks drunk, also mentions that Sherry fought a monster called the Coastal Lord. Kajira heard it, so he asked Sherry if she killed it. He was bewildered when Sherry told them she just helped the monster to calm down. She didn't kill anyone because her dream is to become a king who brings smiles to everyone. Regardless if they're human, monsters, or fairies, everyone in the world. Everyone was speechless. Then the maid suddenly remembered Tart's mother asked one time what kind of king he wanted for his son to become. It's a king who can make everyone smile. She smiles because it looks like Sherry had that same goal. However, Sherry apologized because the group seems there to eat, so he told everyone that she will get a table right away. But Romeo stopped her because they were there to rent a room because they heard that the place is also an inn. Sherry's mother apologized since they knew that it was exam season and they were all booked up. Tart removed the captain's hand on his shoulder and gave the order to kick out 2 or 3 people and gave the room for him, acting arrogant like he used to back when he was still living with his father. As a result, the woman yelled at him that there's no way she would do that. Then out of the blue, the fairy suddenly appears and asks if he was Tart's mentor. The fairy was named Grace. It's been 20 years since they saw each other. Romeo was shocked since she didn't change a bit. Grace calls him an idiot because he didn't see that she switched to a no-smoking pipe. Yet, she was sure that the mad dog that Romeo used to have calmed down a lot. She asked if he was not planning to take the exam again. In response, Romeo said that he already decided that there wouldn't be a second time. That's the only reason he was able to go that far. He assumed that Sherry was her pupil. Grace agrees and claims that she's a bright and kind girl. She also added that fairies are delicate but skillful. That's exactly why they need a kind king, so they won't be used for convenience. She also advised him if he was going to be a mentor, he must make sure to choose his student carefully, because whoever becomes a king will shape the nature of the whole world. A great dream comes with great responsibility. Romeo smiles and promises to keep those words in mind. The maid seemed to be staring at Sherry, who was serving to their customers, and reminded her of someone. Later on, they camp outside of the inn since there were no more rooms for them. Morning came. The ship was ready to sail. Sherry's mother seems worried about her daughter, so she reminds her to be careful because there might be other candidate hunters around. Sherry got it and was grateful for her mom. Then she waved goodbye. Tart, who heard everything, was confused, so he asked Romeo about the exam candidate hunting. Romeo explains that it's an underground business where people get paid by wealthy candidates for their sponsors to take out the competition. After all, the fewer rivals, the better their chances. So he asks Tart to be careful because some of them won't hesitate to kill. Tart couldn't believe it, because for him, those kinds of people are just lowlifes hired by cowards who can't win without dirty tricks. Romeo can't say aloud that his father kinda seems like the type to hire them the most. Then he remembered what Grace told him, to better choose his student wisely. It looks like he picked the wrong guy. Then the ship starts to sail. Tart looked around the ship and found several tough candidates. He was startled when Sherry suddenly appeared asking if those people were all candidates. They can't afford to lose, so she advises Tart to do their best. Then Tart noticed that Kajira seemed nowhere to be found, so she asked the maid where he was. In response, the maid told him that Kajira left early in the morning. The maid explained that Kajira had something coming up, so he told everyone to go on without him, and then he just took off somewhere. Tart was worried if Kajiro was going to make it to the exam in time, but then he realized that maybe it's actually better if he doesn't. Then a commotion started. A guy was angry at a girl for bumping into Smith, one of the candidates. Romeo looks at the commotion and seems to know those thugs. Sherry suggests that she'll go talk to him real quick, but another man stops her. Advise her not to do it because if she does so, she'll get hurt. That guy's Unicorn Smith, one of the top contenders who made it all the way to the final exam. The girl laughs at the Smith and mock his hairstyle because it was really funny. Smith's apprentice seemed terrified when he saw that Smith was shaking in anger after the insult, since it's his pride and joy. Smith unsheathed his sword and dashed towards the girl, but before he could make a strike, a ball suddenly hit his face. As a result, he lost some of his teeth. The ball came from a clown who seems irritated by the way he talks and acts, especially his hair. The clown laughs because Smith has no business being a king. Other candidates were clueless for who the clown was. Then the girl ran to get close to the clown while praising for being so strong, but the clown was shocked when the girl suddenly released her sword and pierced it on him. The girl claimed that the clown looked tough, so she thought he at least dodged it. Tart's group were also dumbfounded. Romeo didn't feel any killing intent towards the girl. Other candidates were asking if the clown was really dead, while Tart seems flustered because that proves that some of them don't mind killing. Then Grace called Romeo and told that the girl was a candidate hunter. She was planning to take out all of them and make a nice chunk of cash. She's an enemy for the candidates, so she starts with her water magic. Romeo was worried because she used the trident of the sea god. People panic and assume that the ship was about to sink, so the enemy told everyone that they were not, because she just uses some shield magic. Romeo realized that she just casually threw out some insane magic, so he angrily asked the girl if she was trying to sink herself along with them. He gritted his teeth when the enemy said that the final exam candidates are doing their best so the ship won't sink. In that way, no one can interfere. Romeo was furious because she planned all of it. Tart was speechless when Sherry suddenly talked and assumed that the event was kinda bad. So Tart called the enemy since she was there because of the money. He gave his money and ordered her to get lost, but the enemy didn't need his pocket change. Then throw something towards him. Luckily, the maid was right on time and caught the needle, which is a centimeter away from his eye. But the maid suddenly aches in pain after touching the needle, because it was coated with neurotoxin from the Suwahara dessert pufferfish. So touching it means one will die in an hour, but if it pierces, one will be dead instantly. Tart was sweating because he was close to dying. However, Sherry suddenly took off her bag and jumped. She also told everyone to go on the boat and escape because she will take care of the girl. Grace was furious and called her an idiot because the enemy is way out of her league. But Sherry didn't listen and transformed into her magical armor. She apologized to Grace because if she ran away, she wouldn't become a king who brings smiles to everyone. Tart worriedly looked at the maid, wondering if he would also going to be killed, but he didn't want to die. Candidates didn't seem to like the enemy's wrongdoing. Romeo uses his shield. Other candidates start to attack the enemy. Even though some of them seem tough and strong, she manages to defeat 2 of them. An old man threw firebird magic at her, but the enemy used a shield to protect herself, then used safety boots to jump high. Another candidate thought that she can't dodge midair, but he was wrong. The enemy simply threw him her staff straight to his head and fell on the floor. Sherry was stunned, as well as the old man on her back that didn't notice a needle with poison was thrown into his bald head. As a result, the old man collapsed. In an instant, 4 of the candidates were being eliminated. Tart seems frightened because the enemy was too strong. She's too skilled from her build to her movements. She can also read their weapons through their actions. According to Romeo, she's not fighting relying on her talent, but using her experience as her weapon. Tart was bewildered because she has experience, yet she was just a kid. He looked at her and was curious about how many people she killed. Grace seems invigorated when she sees Sherry take a step and give a hard punch on the enemy. She assumes that she's a bad match for Sherry. The enemy didn't expect close combat. She notices that Sherry's outfit has some kind of physical enhancement effect. When she was about to move, she was surprised when she couldn't because her clothes were stuck to the deck. According to Grace, only Sherry can use it, the fairy's pendant that converts the user's mana into clothing, pushing their latent ability far beyond their limits. And sometimes, it can draw out unexpected special powers. Sherry created a fireball of magic and fired it at the girl, but the enemy belittles it since it's too small. Either way, she doesn't want to let something unknown get too close. The best move probably is to cancel it out and make a counter at the same time. So the enemy uses her water gun to counterattack, but her eyes widen because the cute fireball becomes a huge one that struck her. Sherry was happy thinking she defeated the enemy. Tart was terrified, while Romeo seemed amazed because she combined 2 spells to create an entirely new kind of magic, as expected from the greatest magical toolsmith of the fairy tribe. Grace was not flattered because the real deal is the girl's latent potential. The enemy was fascinated by that attack because it was going to be a pain to fight. Tart thought he could survive and win, but Grace called him an idiot and asked him to open his eyes because it didn't leave any scratches on the girl. Sherry asked the enemy to surrender quietly, as she didn't want to keep fighting anymore. But to her shock, the girl already figured out that her transformation's about to wear off. The girl also added that the fact that she went out of her way to transform means she can't stay in that form forever. Tart asks the fairy if that's true. But Grace didn't respond and just angrily told Sherry that she already told her about the pendant use mana. Once the mana runs out, the transformation ends. They saw that Sherry was probably running out of mana in about a minute and won't be able to move, and when that happens, she's gonna be killed. So Grace encouraged the other candidate, who is still able to move, to fight. If they work together, they can bring down the enemy. A girl candidate declined first. She doesn't want to team up with someone using freaky and unpredictable magic, because they will drag each other down and die for nothing. Then the captain of the ship announced that he's bringing out the port, so anyone who's running must get on now. That girl apologized to the old fairy for not taking it seriously because she had dreams too. Other candidates followed her and were about to leave. Grace was furious and broke her pipe. She turned to Tart and made sure that he was Romeo's apprentice. Because she knew if Romeo chose him, he got at least some skill. Tart was speechless thinking about the time that he lost with Figo and Romeo. Grace begged him not to abandon Sherry and leave her behind, but Tart turned around and was about to walk away because he couldn't. But before he could leave, the maid begged him to fight because she will fight too. Chernica, the maid, remembers how Tart's father begged to protect his son because he is all he has left. So she told Tart that if he ran away, he had no right to take the king's trial. Tart angrily asks her that if they fight the enemy, they will be killed. If they fail, the trial won't matter. In response, Chernica said that if they don't fight back right now, they'll die too. She needed to take care of him, so she gave him a hard punch to come to his senses. Tart, along with Grace and Romeo, were shocked. She bows and asks Tart not to use her as an excuse to run away. She remembers what Tart's mother asked her. Since his father was totally doting, if she'll be gone, he'll probably spoil him. So when the boy starts heading down the wrong path, she asks her to be the one who set him straight. She also told Tart that the moment things get tough, he tries to use others as an excuse. No one will want a king like that. Leaving behind his mentor who reached out to him, letting a terrified, trembling girl fight all on her own, but he dared to call himself a king. If he was going to chase his dream but sacrificing someone else, then at the very least he must put his own life on the line. She continues and said that what he's aiming for comes with that much resolve and responsibility. Chernica also said that he will not die because she'll protect him. She hugs him, begging him not to run away from what he meant to chase. Tart didn't speak and just burst into tears. Chernica continues to beg him not to run away, but Tart didn't speak and just continued with his tears. Sherry continued to attack, but the enemy avoided it easily and didn't make a counterattack, because she's just waiting until her transformation ends. After a few seconds, Sherry's transformation ends and is out of magic. That's why Grace immediately called her to run away, because the girl was starting to move and made a rush towards her. But Sherry was in shock and her body couldn't respond. To her surprise, before a strike hit her, Tart suddenly jumped to shield her. She thought Tart had run away, but he had not. Tart admits that he wanted to run, but before he could continue, he sensed that the girl was already at his back, but a shield suddenly appeared to block it. The enemy was stunned. She couldn't believe that he reacted to a surprise attack and blocked it. She realized that the shield was from the other candidates, so when she saw a man standing, she made a decision to attack the other first. But before she could attack the man, Tart made a fireball even though there was a shield behind. The man was amazed because it worked. A girl with a tattoo angrily told Tart that there's no way he can coordinate with someone who uses weird magic. In response, Tart told her that it's actually dangerous. Not her, but with him. He remembers what Romeo told him, that he was just a rich kid, nothing special. So he told the two candidates that he doesn't have any special powers. If he fought, he'd probably just get killed right away. But he doesn't want that. He didn't know that giving up on his dream could actually be that scary. Then Chernica's words hit him, that he uses others when things get tough to run away. For him, running is scary. That's why he begged the girl to let him win and just have to do what he says. That girl seems touched by his words because she too heard it right. When Chernica stated that if they are going to chase the dream by sacrificing someone, at least bet their own life on it. Anyway, the enemy was really surprised at Tart. He's more interesting than she thought, because he blocked attacks with his ally's shield, fired magic from the inside, then attacked again with the shield. When it breaks, he sets up another shield. It's simple, yet troublesome. She is supposed to be working, but she can't help but think, what will Tart do if she uses an attack that can't be blocked? So she charges her water magic, creates her huge Asosphere whirling tide orbs, and throws it at Tart. The latter seems prepared and uses the shield to absorb the magic. He remembered what Kajira said, that his body is a beast that eats magic and fires it back. He swung it around using his staff and threw it back at the enemy. Sherry can't help but be amazed because Tart killed the momentum and deflected it, but the enemy already knew his moves. Romeo, on the other hand, recognized the move since he had already used it on him. Tart uses all his defeated moves and mixes them all together, but since he killed the momentum, the speed dropped. That's why the enemy can easily dodge it. But the girl with a tattoo suddenly attacked while the enemy was under the huge fireball. She struck her with her equipment. As a result, it created a massive explosion while the enemy was lying on the floor. Tart was pleading not to get up because he already gave his all and no more tricks to defy her expectations. But he was terrified when the enemy got up and laughed evilly because she thought Tart was the most boring of all. It's been so long since she felt something like that. She's working, but she wanted to know more about Tart on what he can show next. She rushed towards Tart and was about to strike, but her eyes widened when Chernica suddenly appeared and made a counterattack at her. She won't let that enemy kill Tart. Because of her moves, the enemy seems to be having a good time fighting with them. She rapidly created her grand wave. Because of it, there's no way they can block it. It's over for them. But then, a huge monster suddenly appeared. The enemy widened her eyes by the sight. Kajira was behind that monster, so he called Tarte and excitedly told that he made friends with the big monster. But he noticed that the floor of the ship was completely broken. Unfortunately, Kajira didn't come with them when they boarded the ship because something came up. The enemy was shocked when Tart created a fireball magic and threw it at Kajira. Although confused, Kajira swallows it. Then Tart told him that the girl was the enemy. Kajira understood, so he immediately jumped down to face the enemy. The enemy seems confused when she observes his demon fist. He created a magic salamander and struck at her. The enemy was thrown into the water, yet she smiled because in her mind, Kajira was still inexperienced and interesting. Sherry was curious if they won while the two candidates were curious about Kajira for who he was. Tart seems bothered because he claims he was going to be the protagonist of that world, yet he couldn't save the other from a single enemy. The two candidates saw that the enemy was completely unconscious. The girl told the man that he would grab the healing salve and some rope. They will pull her and tie her down. If they kill her, she won't be able to take the exam. The man suggests that he will cast a healing magic at Chernica because they need to slow down the poison spread. Sherry was teary-eyed because some of the candidates died. The smith who's hiding in the back with his apprentice were analyzing if they were safe. Later on, the ship was being pulled by the sea monster that Kajira brought. The latter was happy since it was too fast while Tart wanted to throw up. Gradually, the view of the royal capital Astoria was coming into view. When they arrived, there were vendors offering good meat and pre-royal exams. Others were constructing a monitor to broadcast the opening ceremony across the 20 cities. However, Chernica lies on the bed. Good thing the antidote made it in time, but she'll need a few days of rest. Romeo advises Tart to rest a bit too, and he will buy food and water. Before he left, he told Tart that he thought he would run away. He even thought he should have because life is irreplaceable. But he fought. That's why he was proud of him. Tart was furious because Kajira was the one who defeated the enemy. In the end, he couldn't do anything again. He gritted his teeth in frustration. Romeo gives advice and states that the frustration and the helplessness, they're his hard-earned treasure from fighting. He must cherish them because if he does, he'll grow. People who can keep losing until they win, there really aren't that many. Coming from a loser like him, he's not wrong about that. Then he waved goodbye and left him. But as soon as he closed the door, Romeo felt that his body was heavy from holding a shield for a few hours. He looks at his hand. It's been 20 years of rust. He can't stay with that feeling, so he gets up and continues to walk away. Inside of the room, Tart was wiping his tears when Chernica woke up and called him. He couldn't believe it when Chernica stated that she hated him for being arrogant and for being cowardly too. When his father gave him a private chef to help his body with his pre-exam meal. For doing what others say and thinking his dream will come true. Chernica also insults that his fashion sense is catastrophical bad, that gives off totally repressed virgin vibes. She also mentions that she likes his mother. She was cheerful and kind. She took her in as family, though she was abandoned. When she was young, she asked Tart's mother if she would marry the Lord Croque-Monsieur. They wouldn't be able to meet anymore. She was delighted when his mother assured that she would take her as her personal maid. Because the Lord is head over heels with her, if she pushes, she will usually get her way. She promised her that they will always be together, their family after all. Chernica continued that Tart, who looks nothing like that person, she couldn't accept. If it wasn't for work, she wouldn't want to be near him. But she was wrong because earlier, Tart listened to her. In a life-threatening situation, he didn't run, but he fought. She remembers his mother told her to scold Tart. She felt sorry because she should have faced him much earlier. She blames herself since she's the one who made him weak, the one who kept running without fighting. She apologized to her young master. After hearing her, Tart asks why she was the one to apologize. He remembers Romeo's words, to cherish his frustration and helplessness. If he blames his weakness on others, then he'll have nothing left. He clenched his fist. He thanked the maid because he became a little stronger today. He was grateful for punching him. Upon hearing him, Chernica asked her young master if he was a masochist. In her mind, the young master is going to burn out from the unrequited love, because he blames others when things go wrong. He eats food and doesn't even say thanks. Doesn't even remember that name of his personal chef. But at least she hopes he remembers her name. So she told her name. Tart seems to realize everything. He praised Chernica for doing well earlier. Meanwhile, as Romeo was wandering around, people were gossiping about a person. That person was the king who's been wanting to see him. Romeo asks the king what he is doing with a regular nobody. The king told him that he heard he was among the guys who caught Ino, so he came to see him. At first, Romeo didn't know the name. Then he realized that he's some kid who's been making a name for himself in the underworld lately, and called him innocent. She's the enemy on the ship. The king angrily asked him what's with his polite tone, because in 20 years, he really got real soft. Romeo insults him, as still has no dignity. That's why they called him the Naked King, an embarrassing nickname. The king laughs at him because he likes being simple. These royal clothes are way too fussy for him. When the king called Romeo a loser, his face changed in anger. But he calms himself and asks what he wants. The king said that the reason is simple, a reunion with his beloved rival because it's been 20 years. He's been busy with the royal exam prep and stuff lately. He was fed up and couldn't hold it in anymore, so he asked him to let him land just one hit. Kajira and Sherry suddenly arrive at Chernika's room, asking Tart to go out and eat together. The latter seems irritated since the two didn't knock the door, but to his surprise, Kajira didn't know what knocking on the door was. He told the two that he was taking care of the maid, and the two could go, but Chernica stops him and urged to come with them since his presence is just a nuisance. The two were happy when Tart decided to go. Chernica also added to have fun because she knew that moment might be the last time. Because once the royal exam begins, they might become enemies. Meanwhile, Romeo and the king were surrounded by people when they saw the king start a fight. They realized who Romeo was, so they found the match awesome. They couldn't start the fight in the royal capital, so the king suggested changing the location. But Romeo refused the fight, yet people start to ask if they could watch their duel, as they can't miss the opportunity like that. The king seems overwhelmed. The noise and fights are the soul of the royal capital. That's why he let everyone who wants to watch the duel follow them. People start to cheer, but their happiness vanishes when a lady suddenly appears, asking the king what he is doing just before the royal exam. She also ordered him not to say things on his own for saying that fighting is the soul of the royal capital. She's Karina, the queen consort and a bully queen. The king looks shaking at her presence and quickly explains that it's all part of the king's duty. It's like a pre-party to liven up the royal exam and just wanted to add a bit of color. Karina asks him if he wants to see flowers that badly she can show. A flower so red that'll chill his blood. The king was sweating and looked like he had no other choice. He turned to Romeo and asked if he was taking the exam too. He was satisfied when the latter said that he will not, as he became a mentor to a disciple. This time, there is a historic record of 1 million exam applicants. The king was sure there are tons of formidable enemies among them. He was looking forward to seeing how far Romeo's disciple could go. Meanwhile, Sherry along with Kajira and Tarte were wandering around the area. They were talking about Kajira's little bear that he took to somewhere no one would draw attention. Romeo already advised him not to bring the bear since it was too dangerous and could cause a huge scene. Unbeknownst to them, a lady was observing them. They bump into Figo, who greeted Tarte. Kajira assumed that he was a friend, but Tarte immediately said that he was not. Yet, Figo admits that they were friends from their hometown and the same age. Sherry and Tart started to argue when she called him a chick prince. To stop them, Kajira invited them to eat because he was too hungry, so they decided that Figo could come along, even though Tart didn't like the idea. Inside of the restaurant, they were heaving a chat regarding Tart's journey. Kajira was stunned at Sherry for eating quite a lot. She agreed because they need to be fully recharged before the exam. But Kajira didn't believe her and assumed that she was pushing herself too hard. In her mind, she still remembers the sadness when she couldn't protect the other candidates that's been killed in the ship. She didn't respond, but she abruptly put a fork in Kajira's mouth since it was delicious. She also offers some to Tart and Figo. Kajira chewed the food, but when he found that it was a rustic dough of a meat, he immediately spit it out. He apologized because he couldn't eat meat. In the demon world where he lived, there are only monsters, so eating meat means eating monster meat. He can't eat the meat of his friends, but he can eat fish. So Sherry decided to give him a fish. They were surprised when they heard a loud sound coming from outside. They were worried if something happened. However, people were amazed when a hunting squad returned after hunting the flying dragon. Good thing the royal capital's hunting squad defeated it because of the rumor that it attacked several people. Kajira suddenly stood up when he saw the flying dragon and suddenly ran outside. He asks the squad what they are doing because the monster attacks humans to protect their nest. The flying dragon smells like a mother and they have a strong sense of smell. He also said that its children are coming after, so a tiny flying dragon really arrived. People laugh because it's too small, something that is no match for the hunting squad. A guard told his captain that once the little dragon entered the royal capital, it became a target for extermination. The captain commands to do it, so the guard aims his bow and arrow at the little dragon. Kajira stops them and blocks his body to protect the little dragon. The three went outside and heard people assume that Kajira was protecting the dragon. He knew that monsters and humans are natural enemies for 100 years. The captain ordered Kajira to step aside because even if the dragon was tiny, that is still an enemy of humans. If it grows up, it will become a threat that attacks humans. Right now, it must be eliminated. People agree with the captain, yelling not to show mercy and kill it, while a woman claimed that her husband was killed by a monster and couldn't forget. The three were worried because people were angry and started to throw stones at the tiny dragon. That's why the tiny dragon became wild and seemed about to attack. The guard strikes his arrow towards the dragon. Kajira was terrified and rapidly rushed towards the dragon. People along with Tart's group were shocked when Kajira caught the arrow that was for the dragon and pierced his shoulder, trying to protect it. While the dragon was biting his wrist, Tart was lost for words, trying to understand his action. Kajira felt the pain of the dragon's teeth, but his concern was its feeling after its mother was killed. He turned to the woman who lost the husband, claiming that it was hard. He told everyone that if they continue to keep fighting forever, the suffering will be eternal. That hurt him. That's why he wanted to end it. When he becomes a king, he will make a country where monsters and humans are friends. He begged the dragon to put away his fangs. It looks like the tiny dragon understands him, so it gradually releases his arm and flies away. After that, they went to the hospital to cure Kajira's wounds. Tart was yelling at him like a mother calling her son an idiot, because right before the exam, he hurt himself that badly. Figo couldn't believe that Tart was worried about someone while Sherry praised him for being amazing. She already said that she would be a king who makes everyone smile and yet couldn't do anything. Even earlier, on the ship where she can protect the other candidates. Figo also admits that he felt ashamed of himself because he just wanted to prove he could be a king for a selfish personal reason. Tart didn't know what to say and decided to leave. He told them that he had no intention of continuing to associate with those enemies from then on. Before he left them, he also stated that they are ignorant village people who can keep going like that, sinking forever since it is a useless worry. But he made it clear that the one who will become a king will be him. Then he leaves. Figo observed that he didn't change, but Tarty's words find Sherry a bit of encouragement. The two decided to make themselves keep going and have to get stronger. Tart seems lost because being with his friends he realized he has no strength. Figo wanted to be a king as a machine while he had no special power, no strength. Sherry wanted to become a king who fills the whole world with a smile, even though he didn't have some great noble reason. No grand cause either. He gritted his teeth because he doesn't know what it is that he truly has. He doesn't want to accept that he has absolutely nothing. Chapters end at 9. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope you love this manga. Have a good day.